You have your project all kitted up, you have your fabric and your floss and your chart. Now, where are you going to put that first stitch? I'm Michelle, this is my romantic tangle, and I'm going to weigh in with my opinion on whether you should start your project in the center or in a corner. It's one of those things that tends to get cross-stitchers very opinionated, and I don't know why. Just because someone tells you that their grandma or their aunt said all the best cross-stitchers do it this way, doesn't mean they're right. And even if it does mean they're right, that does not mean that is how you have to do it. So do you start in the center or the corner or someplace else, or does it depend on the project? I did a poll last week and asked my viewers, and the majority said it depends on the project, which I was happy to see, because if everybody disagreed with me, well, I wasn't going to change my ways. I almost always start in a corner. And the reason I do that is because I stitch full coverage pieces. I like having a point that is stable that I can work out from and not kind of trying to go in all directions. I thought I had probably started some projects in the center, and I looked, and it really took some digging before I finally remembered that these little salt box houses, I've been starting them in the center because that puts me at a window, and that's a good strategic place to work out from. I also did some digging and pulled up some pictures because I thought I knew what I had done, but after so long I wasn't sure. I started a little girl's fancy in the center, which put me somewhere here in the trunk. Now, why did I start this one in the center when I don't start anything else in the center? I have no idea. I suspect it had to do with the fact that the edges of this one are so indistinct and that there wasn't a very clear corner to start in. Cuckoo Clock, I started at the center top. And Lovebirds, which I did last year, and I cannot remember what safe place it is in, I started at the point of the heart because, again, this gives a good starting point for me to work out from. If I had started this one in the center according to the pattern, that would have put me somewhere down here in that door, and I just don't see that making sense. It is a matter of personal preference. You can do what you want. The reason that I frequently hear given for starting in the center is that you will know your piece is perfectly centered on your fabric. Most of my pieces aren't perfectly centered on my fabric. This one is, because I gridded from the center and went out, but it's not, as long as I have measured my fabric and I know what size the design is going to be and how much room I have on the edges. There aren't a lot of circumstances where my project has to be centered. If you were working on a pre-finished item, I did a little Halloween cat in a pre-sewn banner a while back, that would make sense to start in the middle. I might have, I honestly can't remember. If you're doing a baby bib that's pre-finished, or if you're doing something to be framed, I think you want it centered, but I think the bigger point is that you want to have enough fabric on each edge, whether that is dead center or not. So the most important thing, in my opinion, is to make sure you know how much fabric you're working with. I have heard a lot of people say that they will start from their center point and then count stitches up to the edge if they want to start stitching with the edge, and I don't trust myself to count lots of stitches up or over. I grid my fabric, so I start in the center and grid out. There's a video about that if you want, and I'll put a link in the description box. But once I have done my gridding, I've started from the center and I've worked out, and I know where the edge of my project is going to be. I can look at the grid lines and I can tell if it is going to be centered and if I have enough in my margins. That works for me. If I am doing Something that for some reason I am not gridding, like an alphabet sampler, I will measure my fabric, I will check the measurements of the design and do the math and figure out at what point in the corner to start to make it work. If you're using a kit, measure your fabric. If you bought your fabric in a package, measure your fabric. If you cut your fabric yourself, measure it carefully and double check your measurements. That will save you a whole lot of grief. And if you're doing something that is slightly rectangular, double check that your fabric is twisted the right way before you start stitching, whether you start in the middle or the edge. The important part is to make sure that you have enough fabric for your design. I've heard a lot of people recommend 3 inches on each side. I tend to go with 2.5 or 3 inches, unless I have a piece of fabric that doesn't allow me that much, in which case I really tend to fudge. I do the same thing with my quilt backings. On a kit, they may not give you 3 inches. This one is a dimensions kit, and top to bottom here, I think is not quite 2 inches, if I have it right. And that is not drastically uncentered. That's just folded under. Let me know, at what point do you start stitching and why? Is it because someone told you to and you're following their rules? Is it because you have decided what works better for you? Is it the same with every project you work on? I'm curious, and I would love to hear your input. Thanks for watching. I'm Michelle. This is my romantic tangle. I am going to start stitching on my blue jays for the blue jay sal. And I actually think I'm going to start down here in this corner with this branch, because then I can navigate my way up to the birds and fill in the white stuff when I'm in the mood. I'll be back with more videos soon. Thanks for watching.